All right, so anyhow, we're going to be looking at a text. I want to take you through a text because the text itself is amazing. We're in the book of Mark. If you're going to follow along, we're in the book of Mark. We will be chapter 3, verse 20 through chapter 5, verse 20. So we're going to try to cover two whole chapters, at least conceptually this morning. Mark chapter 3, verse 20, and there's always Bibles on the back table if you like following along. I'll have some verses on the screen, not a whole lot. I'll have a couple. The basic idea that's going to happen here, Mark's going to open up in this familiar story, or maybe it's not familiar, in this story where everyone thinks Jesus is crazy and the Pharisees are going to accuse Jesus of being a pawn of Satan, right? They're going to say he gets his power from Beelzebub, from the devil, and that's going to start our conversation. And then Jesus is going to talk to them in parables. He's going to teach his disciples something, and then he's going to illustrate it with what he does in his life. So that's kind of what we're going to do. The scene from Matthew, why I'm picking Mark, the reason I'm picking Mark 3, verse 20 through 5, verse 20, is that it's one section. It's bookmarked by the exact same story. In the first story, they are going to accuse Jesus of being controlled by Beelzebub, and Jesus is going to say, listen, that's not how it works, you know. If a kingdom's divided against itself, it can't stand, and you would have to be stronger than a strong man. You'd have to first tie up a strong man if you're going to plunder his house. So, and then the very last story, that Jesus, the very next thing he's going to actually do, the rest is just conversation he's going to have. The next thing he's going to do is go find a demonic, bind that strong man, and set that demonic free to prove his words. Listen, I'm not working for the demonic. I'm against the demonic. Let me prove that by doing it. Let me prove how strong I am by setting free, by being actually able to tie up a strong man and set someone free. I'm going to plunder the strong man's house, the strong man being a demon. I took a long time on Google looking up demon pictures to have on the back of the screen pictures, and I'm like, They're either cartoonish or you'd be like horrified, like, what's he doing? You can't put that on church screen. Let's jump in. I'll see what you say. So Mark chapter 3, verse 20 and following reads like this. Then Jesus entered a house, and again a crowd gathered, so that he and his disciples were not even able to eat. Of course, that's because they don't eat like we do. They lay down on the floor, right? They recline like this at a table, and that takes up too much room. So they couldn't eat. They weren't able to even eat. When his family heard about this, this is Mary and his brothers, right? When his family heard about this, they went to take charge of him, for they said, he's out of his mind, right? So his family's against him. And the teachers of the law who came down from Jerusalem said, these are the rabbis, right? This isn't even the Pharisees, really. This is the rabbis. These are people with more credibility than just the Pharisees. Pharisees and Sadducees, they teach the law, but they're also kind of political groups. When you say the teachers of the law, you mean everybody. Everyone who's a rabbi. You mean both groups. You mean everyone who is credible in understanding the law and God. And the teachers of the law who came down from Jerusalem said, he's possessed by Beelzebub. By the prince of demons, he's driving out demons. So capture the setting, right? Jesus is with some common folk. He's there as the supposed Messiah. He's there as the supposed enlightened one, yes? And everyone credible, the people who know Jesus the best and love him the most in theory, and all the teachers of the law are against Jesus. right? This is a very tense, high-pressure scene. This is not common. This is the one time in all the gospel stories where it says that Jesus' own family think he's nuts, right? They think he's nuts. They're here to gather him up, right? Jesus is a grown man, and his mother is here to take him home. Put him to bed and give him, some soup or something. Like, no, excuse my son. Sorry, nothing to see here. I'll take him home. Sorry for letting him out, right? This is super high pressure. This is whatever criteria, whatever information, whatever interpretation of Scripture, whatever it is they're using to evaluate Jesus, to determine that he's either from Satan or out of his mind, they're wrong, right? They're clearly wrong. They clearly believe precisely what it is that they think they believe. They will have facts to back it up, right? The teachers of the law will be able to quote you Scripture, undoubtedly, to win you to their side that Jesus is possessed by demons. His family will be able to give you lots of examples to say, hey, give him some grace. He's a little loopy. We'll take him home. They're going to have facts. They're going to have opinions. They're going to base it on what they're going to call reality. And they're going to be wrong. Dead wrong, flat wrong, absolutely, categorically wrong. The human brain, they say, is prone to do this. Once we get an idea in our head, we tend to filter things that we are going to use to support our perspective, and then we're going to just criticize everything else. We don't tend, as a species, we do not tend to be open-minded. We tend to like to affirm what we believe. We don't like to change. This is this situation. These people are categorically wrong. They have judged and criticized. They have prejudged the situation. They've gathered the information, all they want and all they need, and they have put Jesus in a box, and they're wrong. They're wrong. Jesus does not want his disciples to be like that, to think like that, to act like that. And so he's going to take the next set of parables, and he's going to teach his disciples how to think in this world. He's going to teach them how to not do that, but to capture every thought for Christ. Look how it bookends. Jump all the way to it must be chapter 5. No, the end of chapter 4, I assume. I only put the verse number, so I don't have the chapter mark. So I think it's chapter 4, starting in verse. No, we're not skipping there yet. Sorry. We're right in these same ones. So Jesus called them over. So I'm still in chapter 3. I'm now in verse 23. Sorry about that. So Jesus called them over. Who? His family and the teachers of the law and his disciples, right? He calls them over like, no, I'm not just going to talk generically. This is important. Get over here, you people who think I'm crazy, who think I am demon-possessed. Listen to me. So Jesus called them over, and he began to speak to them in parables. The first parable, he says, is this. How can Satan drive out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. If a house is divided against itself, the house cannot stand. And if Satan opposes himself, he's divided. He can't stand. His end has come. In fact, no one can enter. I think I have this up here. There it is. No one can enter a strong man's house without first tying him up, right? a strong man's house. You can't go into a strong man's house unless you're stronger than he is, right? You have to be able to overcome the strong man. You can't go in. Listen, if you're saying I am empowered by Satan and yet I'm kicking demons out, then I must be stronger than Satan and therefore I'm not following him. He must be following me or some kind of thing. Your logic's bad. No one can enter a strong man's house without first tying him up. Then he can plunder the strong man's house. Truly, I tell you, people can be forgiven for all of their sins and every slander they utter. Now, I know I'm stopping there. There's a comment that goes on to say, except the unpardonable sin. I'm not teaching on the unpardonable sin this morning. First, I would like to point out this is an amazing sentence by Jesus. Except for the unpardonable sin, which I don't believe we can commit any longer today. I believe that was something that they could because they watched Jesus while he was alive, and they looked him in the face and still denied him, so I think it's very specific. But other than that, I tell you, people can be forgiven for all of their sins. All sin is forgivable. All sin is forgivable right out of the mouth of Jesus. I tell you, people can be forgiven all their sins and every slander they utter. Everything's forgivable. No one can enter a strong man's house without being stronger than he is. Then, if you're stronger than the strong man, you can plunder his house. You can plunder it all you want. I tell you, anyone can be forgiven for all their sins. So how do those even go together? It doesn't even sound like the same thought, does it? It sounds like it's two separate thoughts. Like, how does this have to do with this? Like, you got to be stronger than a demon. Oh yeah, and by the way, every sin is forgivable. Unless you go to the bookend. Go to the bookend. So now jump to chapter 4, I think, verse 35. So Jesus teaches parables. We're going to go back and we're going to look at those parables, but I want to show you the bookends first so that you understand that everything in the middle has to do with what he's doing here. That day when evening came, so at the end of the day, right? At the end of the day, he says to his disciples, hey, let's go to the other side of the lake. Across the lake, while they're going across, Jesus is going to calm the storm and that whole story. But he gets to the other side of the lake in chapter 5, verse 1, I think. They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. The man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with chains, for he'd often been chained hand and foot. But he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Who are we talking about? A strong man, right? All of a sudden, he's accused of being part of Satan's kingdom, and Jesus references a strong man. You can't, no, Satan isn't casting out Satan. That's not how it works. And then to illustrate that, Jesus talks about a strong man. Then he talks to them in parables, and then says, let's go, let me prove what I just said to you. Let's go find a strong man who in fact is demon-possessed, and let's do something about it. Do you see the bookend? Same exact. If it was back to back, you would go, oh yeah. It's precisely the same thing. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. He's a raving lunatic, right? He's a raving lunatic. He's naked. He lives in a graveyard. He comes out at night and howls and cuts himself. And he would put people in fear to the point that they would bum rush him, capture him, chain him up, and he would be able to break the chains and then run away naked and go still howl and scream in the graveyard. This guy would be terrifying, absolutely terrifying. He is clearly a strong man. He is clearly demonic, and Jesus is going to plunder his house. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell at his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." Don't torture me. All right, let's pause for a second. So in our setting, who's all here? We have the teachers of the law, right? They're part of this story. We have Jesus' immediate family. They're part of this story. We have the disciples. They're part of this story. Through there, it's going to say he talked to the crowds in parables, but he would take his disciples aside and really kind of teach them what he was trying to say. His disciples. We have Jesus, and we have a Gentile demonic lunatic, right? What's the difference? How broad would the difference be between those groups? Imagine the behavioral differences between a Gentile lunatic and the teachers of the law. Could you get farther apart with their behavior? You could, right? It'd be very hard to go farther in either direction, right? A raving lunatic demonic who plunders people to live and is naked, and the teachers of the law. What about spiritually speaking? Could you get farther away from Jesus? Let's take Jesus. You have Jesus over here, and on this side you have a demon-possessed Gentile. You can't get farther apart, can you? What about politically? Could you get farther apart from their worldview, from their political views? You have loyalists to Israel, and you have Gentile demonics who are, raising pigs. You have this crazy, this story is like the polar opposites are all mixed in here. The tension is high, people are criticizing and judging, and Jesus, even the demonic would disagree with Jesus. Jesus is going to rescue the demonic. I hope you know kind of where we're headed with that. Even the demonic himself cannot conceive of that, right? He sees Jesus, what does he ask? He doesn't say, oh man, I've been waiting for you. I need to get rid of these demons. He's like, are you here to judge me? Right? Are you here? If you see a holy man, if you're over there and you see a holy man coming at you, this is the one concept you have. You're clearly coming over here to judge me. Why else would you be coming this direction? This scene is set up perfectly for polar opposites to have to wrestle. Only Jesus has the right perspective on who this guy could become. And only Jesus sees this guy correctly. He doesn't even see himself correctly. Are you here to judge me? In God's name, don't torture me, he says. Jesus says to him, come out of this man, you impure spirit. And then Jesus asked him, what is your name? And he says, my name is Legion. He replied, for we are many. We are many. What would it take? What would it have had to take for Jesus over here to care about that guy over there? Jesus has got tons of work to do in Israel, right? More work than he can actually accomplish. They're going to kill him, right? This is the end of that story. He's got tons of work to do. But he's going to want his disciples to think so radically that he's going to pause when these people are judging him wrongly, he's going to pause the scene. They're going to get in a boat. They're going to go over to the other side. They're going to meet this guy. They're going to get right back in a boat and come across because he wants his disciples to learn a lesson. Before he takes them over there, he's going to walk them through these parables. Look at these parables. Now jump all the way back to chapter 3. Verse 31. And if I'm in the wrong chapter, just quickly go to the next chapter. Sorry, I didn't do that on my paper. It says this. Then Jesus' mothers and brothers arrived. Standing outside, they sent someone in to call him out. A crowd was sitting around him, and they told him, "Your mother and your brothers are outside looking for you." And Jesus answers this way. "Who are my mother and my brothers?" he asked. Then he looked at those seated in the circle around him and said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does God's will is my brother and my sister and my mother." Oh, that's a parable, meaning figure it out. I don't think it's that complicated. What is he saying? What's the point of this parable? I think the point of this parable is to make this statement. Those who are in my spiritual family are more important than even my physical family. I am a spiritual creature. I came through the physical family, but I have been joined to a spiritual family that is bigger and more important and takes priority, and they get my focus. My spiritual family trumps my physical family. Right? What? Would you agree with that interpretation? Seems like that's what he's saying, doesn't it? Okay, we got to put all the parables together before we kind of get the point. But that's the first one. So he's going to, first off, say, listen, I'm not without my family. They're not here. They don't get to call me home. I have my family right here. Yeah. Next parable. Chapter 4, verse 3, I believe. He's going to throw this parable in the middle. "Listen," Jesus says, "listen, a farmer went out to sow his seed, and as he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came up and ate it. Some fell on rocky places where it didn't have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Others fell among the thorns, which grew up and choked the plants, so that they didn't get to bear grain. Still others fell on good soil. It came up, grew, and produced a crop, some multiplying 30, some 60, some 100 times." He goes on to explain this parable, so this one we don't even have to guess at, but you've probably heard this one 1,000 times in your life, so I'm going to assume Jesus isn't talking about how, he isn't giving advice to farmers, right? Oh, by the way, don't throw your seed on the path. Doesn't work. He isn't doing that. He's making a spiritual connection, and he's saying spiritual seed is very much like normal seed, right? Be good soil. Some of the seed you throw lands on good soil, some doesn't. How can you tell it's good soil? It makes a crop, right? It makes a crop. It bears fruit. Listen, it's worth throwing seed there. Why? Because it's making fruit. How can you tell if it's great soil? Bigger crop, bigger crop, bigger crop, right? Spiritually speaking, this is the same thing. How can you tell who's good soil? Before you throw seed. Before you throw any seed, how can you tell who's good soil? You cannot. That's precisely the point. You cannot tell who's good soil ahead. You can't prejudge the situation. If you prejudge the situation, you're thinking like the world. This is precisely what you guys did to me. You don't know. You can't prejudge. Throw the seed. Throw the seed. You'll find out who's good soil. You'll find out who's great soil. Tip my hand a little. Who's going to end up being great soil at the end of this story? The best soil we have seen yet in the whole entire story of Jesus' life, as a matter of fact. It's going to be the demonic. He's going to be the amazing soil in this story. Who would have seen that coming? Who would see that coming? If you were going to pick good soil, here's your groups, the teachers of the law. Wouldn't this be the soil you would expect? Yes, they've been studying the Bible their whole lives. How about his family? Wouldn't this be good soil? They love him. What a huge advantage they have. This should be good soil. How about the disciples? They're disciples after all. Shouldn't they be good soil? Who would not be good soil? The demonic. This is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. His next parable. Verse 21. He said to them, "Do you bring a lamp in and put it under a bowl or a bed? When you turn the lights on, do you first put a blanket over them? No, this is ridiculous. Instead, don't you put it on a stand? For whatever is hidden is meant to be disclosed. That's why you turn the lights on. The whole point of the light is to see clearly. Whatever is concealed is meant to be brought in the open." Is he talking about turning the lights on in a room? Is he giving people life instructions? Oh, by the way, don't put a candle under a bed. You'll burn the whole place down. No, of course not. This is nonsense. He's talking about light. What light is he speaking of? The gospel, of course, right? Spiritual light. Jesus is the light of the world. You don't hide Jesus. You throw him like seed. You should take the light that you have, and the goal of the light is to share the light, to turn the light on everywhere. This is the goal of light. Take the seed of the gospel, spread it everywhere, because you have no idea. You have no idea where the good soil is. But if you think and act like this world, you're going to act like my family and the teachers of the law, and you're going to start prejudice, you're going to start judgmental, you're going to prejudge the situation, you're only going to be critical, and you're going to only look at information that backs up what you already believe, and you're going to be wrong. You're going to be wrong. You're going to limit the work of God. You're going to think like the world thinks, and you're not going to share the light. Don't be like that, disciples. He's not even done yet. The next parable. Consider carefully what I'm saying. I'm in verse 24. Consider carefully what you hear. He continued, with the measure you use, it will be measured to you plus more. What is he saying there? Division loves to happen. And as soon as it starts, it gets on a roll. If you come out negative, if you come out bashing, if you come out prejudiced, if you come out criticizing, guess what's going to happen? Right back plus some. Don't be like that, guys. Don't be like that, disciples. Let me illustrate what I'm saying to you. Let's get in the boat. I'm going to go all the way across the Sea of Galilee. We're going to find a demonic. And here's how that story ends. I'm all the way at the end of our story again. Chapter 5, verse 16. Those who had seen it right? These are the Gentiles who had watched Jesus cast out the demons from this lunatic, who were the shepherds of the pigs. I don't know. Are you a shepherd of pigs? Farmer, rancher of pigs? I don't know, whatever that is. So the people who tended the pigs, the demons want to go in the pigs instead of going straight to hell or whatever that's going on there. Kind of weird. He sends them in. The people freak. They go tell everyone around, right? Those people who had seen it told the people what happened to the demon-possessed man, and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave. Leave, get out of here. We don't want any of you, right? Here's the more criticizing of Jesus. Get out of here. Go where people like you. Well, don't go back over there. They don't like you either, right? Get out of here. Then, as Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. This guy is converted. This guy, the lights are on, the fog is gone. He is set free. All his sins have been forgiven. Jesus plundered the strong man's house. The strong man, of course, is not this man. It's the demons. It's the legion. So it's not even just one. It's a legion of demons. Why? Because Jesus is demonstrating the ability to change a life here. He goes to a guy who's a legion could be up to 5,000. This is the Roman word. It could be 5,000. A lot of demons. Jesus plunders them. He ties up that strong man and plunders his house, and he rips from the house of a strong man a human being, and he frees him for who knows how long. He's free at last. Imagine the crimes this guy has committed. Why do they want him in chains? It's not just, he lives in a graveyard. Who cares? He's a criminal. How is he still alive? What is he eating? He's stealing people's crops. Is he murdered? Probably, right? He's a lunatic. They've tried to bind him with chains. They can't. What crimes has he committed? Ask the teachers of the law. Tell me, teachers of the law, what do you think he's guilty of? That list, what would that list be? Huge, right? It'd be huge. They would go back to probably generational. Well, let's start that conversation with his great-grandparents before we even start talking about him. This guy is hopelessly lost. He is hopelessly far away. There's no hope. There's no reason to go over there. The only thing you should do with people like that is avoid them, criticize them, prejudge them, assume there's no hope, no change, no life possible. Assume that they are only one-way ticket to hell because they are so set against God. There's no redeeming them. There's no hope. All wrong. All wrong. Categorically wrong. Unbelievably wrong. He begs to go with Jesus. Jesus says, no, you can't come. You don't get to come. I'm going to send you on mission. I need you to stay here, and I need you to tell everyone in the Decapolis what's happened in your life. Okay, that's what I'll do. Jesus leaves. The next time he comes to the Decapolis, he only goes 2 times that I'm aware of. This time, and then the next time. The next time he goes, do you know what story it is? Jesus feeds the 4,000. The next time he shows up, huge crowds gather. They bring all their sick, they bring all their ill, they bring all the demon-possessed, and Jesus heals them all. So many that he has to feed 4,000 men, that's maybe 10,000 in the crowd. And they all long for Jesus to stay. Do you know what changed? Good soil. The best soil. The disciples didn't pull that off. Not till Jesus is dead. This guy pulls off, he converts the entire region. When Jesus shows back up, he has followers. The crowd send him away. Get out of here. Disciples, what I just showed you is that you have absolutely no ability to determine ahead of time what's good soil and what is not. It's pretty straightforward, right? The lesson is really simple. But it's not simple. It's not. So let me get on my soapbox for a minute. In this story, well, in Grace Chapel, in this room right now, we have very, very staunch Democrats. And in this room, we have very, very staunch Republicans. This next year is going to try to divide you. It's going to try to break you apart. This is the cycle we're in. Our town, out those doors, are very strong Republicans and very strong Democrats. What is it going to take for us to build a bridge to them? What is it going to take for you to build a bridge across the political lines, even in this group right here? Imagine the bridges that Jesus is forcing his disciples to build, to think in terms of people like that as brothers and sisters. Jesus is saying, the parables, listen, here's the parables. This guy is more important to me than my flesh and blood. He's a Gentile demonic. This is the parable. Right before I go here, I want to tell you, listen, people that get on board, that's who God loves, that's where good fruit is, and that's whose family. Did Jesus have a political conversation with him first? In the boat on the way across are his disciples. We know when Jesus handpicked the disciples, they're defined. Some of them are tax collectors and some of them are zealots, right? This is Republican Democrat, right? A zealot is someone who is absolutely pro-Jerusalem, like Messiah, and no foreigner has any right to be in our land or rule us. We're God's people. We're special. They should all die. The other is tax collector. That's precisely the exact opposite, right? No, I love my job. I work for Rome. I tax you guys. I give the money to Rome because they do a way better job at ruling our country than you do. You are wrong. Your ways are backwards. You have all the wrong priorities. Jesus handpicked those. He put them in a boat. And he floated across where both of them would go, okay, this is too far. No, he can't get in the boat. No, of course not. Oh, thank you, Jesus, for saying no. No, I didn't mean no. I meant he's your brother, and he's on mission. Hopefully the same mission that you guys get on. What's the mission? Bridges, not walls. Bridges, not walls. And I don't mean that politically. That's not what I mean. I mean to people. We build bridges, not walls. Christians are not the policemen of the world. We're the firemen. We rush into burning buildings and we rescue people. This whole entire story, Jesus is trying to give his disciples this idea. Listen, drop all the rest. You have one job that is so much bigger. Stop thinking small. Stop thinking the next 4 years and start thinking eternally. You have one job. The world will rule itself. Don't worry. There's only one group of people who God can send into the world to bind the strong man and free people. There's only one group of people who have a message of all sin is forgivable. All sin has been paid for and is forgivable. There's one group who has that message. And listen, disciples, if you prejudge the situation, you're not going to do it. You're going to build a wall, not a bridge. You're going to prejudge, and you're going to not allow people to get the message. You're going to hear the wrong message. I'm of the conviction that when we take a side too strongly, people will not listen to your politics. They will not listen to your religion. When you take a political stance so strong that you're just criticizing, and I get it, right? This year, you're going to hear the news, and they're going to tell you, listen, if a Republican gets elected, we are all going to be racists and we're all going to end up, we're going to have a racist country that's totally divided, and we're all going to have guns. And if a Democrat gets elected, listen, we are going to end up in poverty. We're going to end up socialists. We're going to kill all the children. And that rhetoric is just going to get deep. And you are going to be tempted to repost memes. You're going to be tempted to have conversations that only bashes. But you're bashing people in this room right now, whichever side you take. They love Jesus. They love the Bible. They are growing in their faith. They might be more mature, spiritually speaking, than you. You're part of the same family. We have one mission. One. We are the called out ones. We are the separated few who are called out of the world and then sent back into the world. This guy, he's called out, he's new, he's set free, but then sent back into the world. Now go tell him one message. Paul says this. This is radical. Paul longs for our single-mindedness. He says, I wish you could be so single-minded. You want to know what I really wish for you? I wish you weren't even married. I wish you were single like me so that you could be that single-minded. Even your wife is a distraction to the single-mindedness you should have in Christ. But he says, not many of you have that gift. I get it, so it's better. You'd be way worse off if you were single. I would for sure. So it's good. Get married. I'm just talking about how single-minded you should be. We are first responders. If that's true, if God can even use that illustration to talk about single-mindedness, imagine how silly, how wrong, how unsingle-minded it is to get totally wrapped up into the political cycle. You should vote. You should have an opinion. This is America. We live in a democracy. But you should build bridges to people. You shouldn't criticize. You want to defend something, go ahead. Don't criticize anything. Don't be negative in any way. How about that? Wouldn't that be amazing? Only positive. No negative speech. Don't criticize people. Don't use sarcasm this year. This year will not be a good year for sarcasm. It won't be. The world will see your memes. They will put us in a box. The people in our town that we have been sent to build bridges to, they will put our church in a box as you speak for us. Don't do it. You do not have my permission to be that person and represent Grace Chapel. You don't. Either direction, I don't care which one. Half of you, a third of you are going to vote Democratic. 2/3 are going to vote Republican. You're on the same team. Not politically, but way higher than that. Way, way higher than that. Bring every thought captive to Christ. Do you know what that means? Be committed to what's really important. Don't let the world sidetrack you in, suck you into the dark side of politics. Because the dark side of politics, make no mistake, is division. It is not unity. And when we put other hurdles in front of the cross, we silence the message. Jesus illustrates this painfully to his disciples, starting with a crowd people who should be on his side are not. They were wrong. They prejudged him. Jesus goes to the extreme. Disciples, don't you dare even prejudge a naked, demonic Gentile. Don't even do that. That's hard. This is hard. Being in this world, being a human being, a citizen of America, and not prejudging, this is not easy. If you think this is simple, like, capture every thought, bring all your life and all your energy and all your thoughts into one mission, the gospel, set people free, plunder the strong man's house and take his goods. You can't get sidetracked. Peter Kreeft, theologian, writes something like this. He says, see how harsh we must be with ourselves to not stop and smell the flowers if our goal is to get home. See how harsh we must be with ourselves to not stop and smell the flowers if instead you're trying to get home. Jesus is saying, set your goal here. Don't get sidetracked. Don't get sucked into the mix. Build bridges, not walls. That's my challenge to you. Goal for 2020. Bring every thought captive for Christ. Before you say anything in any conversation, before you post anything in anyone's timeline, ask yourself, am I building a bridge so that they will hear me when I speak into their life with spiritual good news, or am I building a wall? Am I shutting them out? Am I prejudging? Am I judging at all in that sense? Yeah, for what it's worth. Let's pray. All right, I got a trivia question for you, but I also want to close with that. Can you take it to the verses that I was going to use, like the last verses I didn't use? What does Paul say? In Romans 13, he says, obey the government because there is no authority except the authority that God has established. Yes? This is the opening idea of Romans 13. What does he say right before that? Tough question, I know. This is what he says. This is Romans 12, 16 to 21. Live in harmony with everyone. Don't be proud. Be willing to associate with people of low position. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. Try that. If it's possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with all people. If your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him a drink. And in this way, you'll heap coals on his head. And that's not a negative, that's a positive in this culture. They carried everything on their head. And what he's saying is, if you do what I'm saying here, when your neighbor comes and asks you for a coal so that they can take it home and light the fire in their house that went out, you won't give them a coal, an ember. You will heap all the coals from your fire and you will give it to them. If you're really doing what I'm going to say, you're going to bless everyone. You're going to build bridges to everyone. The very next verse, the government's in God's hands. This is your job. God's got the government. That's what God says. Blame him. Thank you for coming.